The outpost was quiet that night. The humans had built it at the edge of the galaxy on a barren moon with nothing but rock and silence. Outside the observation deck, the stars stretched forever, like endless fires in a black ocean. It was beautiful, but to Daniel it felt cold, empty, a reminder of how small he really was. Daniel sat by the window, his hands wrapped around a metal cup. The water inside trembled slightly, the way his hands always did when memories came back. He tried to steady them, but he couldn't. Even now, months after the war, the tremor still returned, echoes of battles he wished he could forget. He had lost friends. He had lost brothers. He had lost the version of himself that once believed life was simple. And now, in the quiet, he often wondered what was left of him. That was when the door slid open. A soft sound, almost unnoticed, but Daniel lifted his eyes. And she was there, Alira. She walked into the observation deck with the kind of grace that never seemed to belong in a place built for war. She was not human, but Zayari, one of the silver-skinned people who had once been humanity's greatest enemy. Her tall frame shimmered faintly under the dim lights, as if her skin carried the reflection of every star outside. She didn't wear armor tonight. No weapons, no signs of command. Just a simple uniform, and yet she still carried a presence that made the air feel different. Strong, quiet, unshaken, Daniel almost looked away. He wasn't sure if he had the courage to face her tonight. But Alira crossed the room without hesitation. She didn't ask permission, didn't wait for an invitation. She simply sat down beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her presence, but not so close that it broke the fragile boundary between them. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't heavy, not exactly. It was delicate, like glass that might shatter if a wrong word was spoken. Daniel stared at the stars again, pretending not to notice her. But every second he felt her presence more and more. Finally, he couldn't stand it. His heart was beating too fast. His hands were trembling too much. His thoughts wouldn't stop racing, colliding, screaming at him that this was wrong, that he shouldn't say anything. But out of his mouth, before he could stop himself, came the words so foolish, so reckless. He wanted to take them back the moment they left him. "If I kissed you, what would you do?" The sound of his own voice startled him. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp against the silence. The cup in his hand nearly slipped, and his face flushed hot as he realized what he had just said. He had not meant to speak it. Not truly. It was a thought, a ghost of a question buried in his mind, a whisper that should have stayed hidden forever. But now it was real. Now it hung in the air like a blade. Daniel braced himself for laughter, for disgust, for anger, for the look that would remind him of what he was, just a human soldier, broken and weary, speaking foolish words to a woman from another world. But Alira did not laugh. She did not recoil, or glare, or leave. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dark. She studied him, not as a soldier, not as an officer, but as something else, something more, and then she answered. Her voice was soft, but it carried weight. Every word sank deep into him, deeper than any wound the war had left. "I would not stop you." Daniel blinked, his breath caught in his throat. He stared at her, waiting for more, waiting for the sharp edge of a joke or the quiet cruelty of rejection. But none came. Instead, she looked away from him and placed her hand against the glass window, her long fingers spreading gently over the cold surface. Her reflection merged with the stars. "Do you know why?" she continued. Her voice trembled slightly, though it was still calm. "Because you are the first human who has looked at me as more than a weapon, more than an enemy, more than a symbol of war." Daniel's mouth opened, but no sound came. His chest felt tight. Alira's eyes softened as she kept looking at the stars. Her face, usually unreadable, now carried something fragile, something human, even if she wasn't. "I fought beside you," she said. "I saved lives as you did. I bled as you did. Yet when most of your people see me, they do not see who I am. They see only the battles, the pain, the history written in fire. But you, when you look at me, I feel different. I feel seen." Her words struck him harder than any weapon. Daniel wanted to speak. He wanted to say that she was more than she believed, that he had seen her fight not just with strength but with compassion, that he had watched her shield the weak, tend to the wounded, and risk herself again and again when she had no reason to. But his voice betrayed him. It stayed locked in his chest. She turned her gaze back to him. her expression unreadable now except for the faint glimmer in her eyes. "We lost much, Daniel," she whispered. "Worlds burned. Families broken. I carry those ashes with me always. And still, when I stand here with you in this silence, I feel something I thought I would never feel again." She paused. Her breath shook, barely audible. "I feel human." Daniel's hands tightened around the cup. He couldn't look away. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't understand how his simple, foolish question had unlocked something so raw, so real. The silence returned, but it was no longer the same. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't awkward. It was fragile, like something sacred, like the stars themselves had bent closer to listen. Daniel lowered his gaze, his heart racing in his chest, his mind spinning with thoughts he could not control. What had he done? What had he started? And why, deep down, did part of him wish he could ask the question again? Daniel sat frozen, her words echoing inside him like the vibration of a struck bell. "I feel human." It was such a small sentence, but it carried so much weight. It was not something he expected to hear from her, someone who had once been part of a race that nearly destroyed humanity. And yet, as she said it, he could see the truth in her eyes. Elira was not speaking as a soldier, not as a leader, not as a Ziyari. She was speaking as a person who had suffered loss and carried scars just like him. Daniel tried to speak, but no words came. His throat tightened, and all he managed was a quiet breath that fogged the glass in front of him. His heart was pounding too loudly. Elira did not look at him directly now. She kept her eyes on the stars outside, her silver skin glowing faintly against the reflection. "I would not stop you," she repeated softly, her voice calm, but filled with something raw. "Because in that moment I would not be a commander. I would not be an alien. I would not be anything but someone who wants to feel alive again." Her hand slid slowly down the glass, leaving no mark, but Daniel felt as if she had touched his heart instead. Silence lingered again, but this time Daniel couldn't let it stay. His voice cracked when he finally found it. "Why me?" he asked. The question escaped before he could shape it. It was almost a plea. Elira blinked slowly, then finally turned her head to look at him. Her eyes were bright, deep, endless, as if entire galaxies lived inside them. "Because you do not hide your brokenness," she said. "Most humans I have met, they cover their pain with anger, with hate, with blame. But you," she hesitated, searching for words, "you carry it openly. You tremble, yet you still fight. You grieve, yet you still protect. And when you look at me, you do not look away in shame or fear. You see me?" Daniel swallowed hard. His chest tightened as if something heavy pressed down on it. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that he wasn't strong, that he was weak, that his trembling hands were proof of his failures. But deep down, a part of him knew she was right. He had never hidden his pain. He had never been able to, and somehow she didn't see that as weakness. Elira's gaze softened. For the first time, Daniel thought he saw sadness in her expression. Not the cold, hardened sadness of a soldier, but something much gentler. "Do you know what the hardest part of the war was for me?" she asked suddenly. Daniel shook his head. He didn't trust his voice. She took a long, quiet breath before answering. "It was not the battles, not the wounds, not even the fear of dying. It was the silence after the battles. The silence when the screams stopped and I realized how many faces I would never see again." Her voice broke slightly, though she kept it steady. "When I stand in that silence, Daniel, I feel like I am falling into emptiness. But when I sit here with you, the silence does not feel empty. It feels full, like it has meaning." Daniel's heart clenched. He knew that silence too well. He had lived in it, drowned in it, nearly broken under its weight. And now, hearing her describe it, he felt less alone. Without thinking, his hand moved slightly, resting on the edge of the bench between them. He didn't touch her, not yet, but the gesture was enough. A quiet offering, a silent bridge. Elira looked at his hand, then at him. For a moment, Daniel thought she might take it. His heart raced, but she didn't. Instead, she simply smiled faintly, a fragile smile that looked as though it had fought to exist. "One day," she whispered, "you will understand how rare this is. How rare it is for me to sit beside a human and feel no walls between us. Not of fear, not of duty, not of history. Only this." Daniel could barely breathe. He stared at her speechless, his thoughts spinning too fast to catch, and then, before he could stop himself, he asked another question. Do you Do you want me to? Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Want you to what? Daniel's voice dropped lower, trembling but firm. Kiss you. Elira didn't answer immediately. Her silence stretched long enough for Daniel to feel his courage slipping away, his chest tightening with regret. But then she leaned slightly closer, her silver eyes glowing with a strange, gentle light. If you kissed me, Daniel, she said slowly, carefully, as if each word was fragile glass, I would not stop you, but I would ask something in return. Daniel's breath caught. What? Her gaze locked onto his, sharp and soft all at once. That you do not kiss me out of loneliness, she whispered. Do not kiss me because you are broken. Do not kiss me because you are afraid of silence. Kiss me only if you see me, not as alien, not as soldier, but as Elira. The room felt smaller. The stars outside seemed to fade. The only thing Daniel could see was her face, her eyes, her trembling voice carrying more truth than he had ever heard before. His lips parted, but no words came. He could only stare at her, his chest aching, his soul caught between fear and longing. Elira leaned back slightly, giving him space, her faint smile returning. Do not answer now, she said softly. Let the stars hold the question. If the answer is true, it will wait. And with that, she rose from the bench, her silver form bathed in starlight. Without another word, she walked toward the door. Daniel sat frozen, his breath shallow, his mind spinning. His heart screamed to chase after her, to answer her now, to tell her she was more than she believed. But he didn't. He stayed, staring at the stars, replaying her words again and again. Do not kiss me out of loneliness. Kiss me only if you see me. And in that moment, Daniel realized something terrifying. He had never wanted anything more. Daniel did not sleep that night. He lay on his bed staring at the ceiling, the faint hum of the outpost's machinery filling the silence. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. Every time he tried to calm his mind, he heard her voice again. Do not kiss me out of loneliness. Kiss me only if you see me. Those words had cut deeper than any blade. They weren't rejection. They weren't acceptance either. They were something far more dangerous, an invitation that demanded truth. Daniel rolled onto his side, pressing his hand against his chest. His heart was still racing hours later. Did he see her? Truly see her? Or was he just another soldier clinging to the first light he'd found in the darkness? The war had left holes in him. He knew that. Friends gone, family scattered, his world burned and scarred. Sometimes he felt like he was just walking through the days as a shadow of who he once was. And now, here she was, Elira, an alien who had once been his enemy but who now stood closer to him than anyone else. Was it love, or was it desperation? That question burned inside him until he couldn't stay in his bed anymore. He stood restless and walked the empty halls of the outpost. The metallic floors echoed beneath his boots. Lights flickered faintly, and far in the distance he could hear the hum of generators. The war was supposed to be over, but Daniel knew peace was fragile. Even here, they still had to be ready for attacks. The thought of losing Elira in another battle made his stomach twist. He remembered the way she looked at him tonight, not as a soldier, not as a human, but as someone who mattered. He wanted that look again. He wanted it more than he dared admit, but fear clung to him. What if he was wrong? What if what he felt wasn't love, but simply a need to fill the emptiness inside him? What if he kissed her and she saw only weakness? What if he ruined everything? Daniel leaned against the cold wall and closed his eyes. He remembered the first time he met her. The war was still raging then. He had been assigned to a mission with mixed squads, humans and Ziyari fighting together for the first time. Trust was thin. Hatred ran deep. He had been ordered to guard her flank. He hadn't wanted to. He hadn't trusted her. But then the ambush came. Blaster fire rained from the cliffs and he had fallen, pinned, certain that death was seconds away. And she had been the one who saved him. She had pulled him behind cover, taken the hit that was meant for him, and fought like a storm until the attackers fled. When it was over, when he had looked at her bleeding form lying on the ground, he realized something terrifying. His heart had clenched in fear not for himself, but for her, and that fear had never left. Now, months later, that fear had grown into something else, something he could no longer name. Daniel pushed away from the wall and kept walking. His steps carried him back to the observation deck without even realizing it. He stopped at the doorway, staring at the bench where they had sat together. The stars outside glowed just as cold and endless as before, but the room felt different now, because this was where she had spoken those words. This was where everything had changed. He sat down slowly, placing his hands on his knees, staring at the stars. "Do I see you, Illyra?" he whispered to the empty room. His voice cracked. "Or do I just need you to cover the holes inside me?" The stars, of course, gave no answer, but in his heart he knew he couldn't run from the question forever. The next morning, Daniel tried to avoid her. He went to drills earlier than usual, kept his head down during the briefing, and chose a different table in the mess hall. Every time she entered the room, his chest tightened. Every time he felt her eyes searching for him, he forced himself to look away, but it hurt. It hurt more than he expected, because in avoiding her he realized something. Silence without her was empty again. It wasn't the kind of silence she had spoken about, the full silence that carried meaning. It was the old silence, the kind that ate him alive. He hated it. By the third day he couldn't take it anymore. He found himself standing outside her quarters, fists clenched, heart racing. He raised his hand to knock, then froze. His mind screamed at him to turn back, to stop this before it went too far. But before he could move, the door slid open. Illyra stood there, her silver eyes calm but searching. "Daniel," she said softly. His heart almost stopped. For a long moment they just stared at each other. No words, no excuses, just the weight of everything between them. Finally she spoke. "You have been avoiding me." Daniel swallowed hard. I needed to think." Illyra tilted her head. "And what did you find?" He shook his head helplessly. "I don't know. I can't stop thinking about what you said, about not kissing you out of loneliness, and I keep asking myself if that's all I am, if I'm just broken and desperate. I don't want to use you to fill a hole inside me. You deserve more than that." Her expression softened. She stepped aside and gestured for him to enter. Inside, her quarters were simple. A single bed, a desk, a small window showing the same endless stars. No decoration, no warmth. Yet as Daniel stepped in, he felt her presence filling the space. She turned to him, her silver skin glowing faintly in the dim light. "Daniel," she said quietly, "do you think I am not broken too?" He froze. Her voice trembled slightly, but she kept speaking. "I lost my family. I lost my home. I lost pieces of myself I will never get back. Do you think I do not carry emptiness too? Do you think I do not ache in silence when the lights go out?" Daniel's throat tightened. Illyra stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "You are not the only one afraid of loneliness, but when I sit with you the fear is quieter. The silence does not crush me. That is why I told you not to kiss me out of emptiness, because if you do, it will break us both. But if you kiss me because you truly see me, then maybe, just maybe, we will both begin to heal." Daniel felt tears burn in his eyes. His hand shook, not from weakness, but from the weight of her words. He wanted to speak, to promise her that he did see her, that he had always seen her. But the words caught in his throat. Instead, he nodded slowly, and in that small nod, in the silence that followed, something shifted between them, something fragile, something powerful, something that felt like the beginning of an answer. The outpost slept under the watch of the stars. For a few days, Daniel felt the silence grow softer. He no longer avoided Illyra. He no longer hid from the weight of her words. They didn't spend every moment together, but when they did, the air between them felt calmer, warmer. For the first time since the war, Daniel thought peace might be real. But peace is fragile. And peace in their world never lasted long. It began with the alarms. A scream of sirens ripped through the metal halls, sharp and merciless. Red lights flashed across the ceilings and the outpost came alive in chaos. Soldiers ran. Orders were shouted and weapons were pulled from racks. Daniel bolted from his quarters, his heart slamming against his ribs. He knew this sound. He had heard it too many times. It was not a drill. It was not a mistake. It was an attack. The war was not over. He grabbed his rifle from the wall and ran through the rushing crowd. The base trembled as distant explosions shook the ground. Outside, engines roared and plasma fire lit the night sky. The enemy had returned. Old enemies, remnants of the factions that had refused to surrender, still clinging to hatred, still hungry for revenge. They had found the outpost and they wanted blood. Daniel pushed through the smoke-filled corridor, and then he saw her, Elira. She stood near the main doors, her tall silver form glowing under the red lights. She wore no fear, only calm, only determination, as if she had been waiting for this. She raised her own weapon, leading the defense without hesitation. Daniel ran to her side, his breath ragged. "Elira!" he shouted. She turned her head slightly, her eyes sharp, but when she saw him, something softened in her gaze. "You came." "Of course I came," Daniel snapped, raising his rifle. "Where else would I be?" The doors shook violently as the enemy outside hammered against them. Sparks rained, smoke filled the air, and the soldiers around them gripped their weapons tighter. Some were afraid. Some were too young for war. But all of them looked to Elira. Her voice cut through the chaos. "Hold your ground," she commanded. "They will come through the doors, but they will not take this outpost. Not while we stand." The soldiers straightened. Even in the storm of fear, her words gave them strength. Daniel looked at her, his chest tightening. She was more than a soldier, more than an alien. In that moment, she was hope itself. The doors exploded. A wave of fire and smoke burst inward, throwing metal shards across the hall. Enemy soldiers stormed through, armored and armed, their shouts filling the air. Plasma bolts blazed in every direction. Daniel fired without thinking. His rifle kicked against his shoulder as he dropped one attacker, then another. The room turned into chaos. Screams, explosions, the bitter smell of burning metal. Beside him, Elira fought like a storm. Her movements were sharp, fluid, unstoppable. She struck with precision. Every shot finding its mark, every motion carrying the strength of someone who refused to surrender. But the enemy was many. Too many. They pushed forward step by step, their fire tearing holes in the walls in the soldiers around them. Daniel's heart pounded. He shouted orders, pulled comrades behind cover, but the tide kept coming. And then he saw it. A plasma grenade rolled across the floor, glowing with deadly light. It stopped near Elira's feet. "No!" Daniel screamed. He ran without thinking. The explosion thundered, fire and smoke erupting through the hall. Daniel threw himself toward her, tackling her to the ground, his body shielding hers as the blast tore through the room. Heat scorched his back. Pain seared his skin, but he didn't let go. When the smoke cleared, he opened his eyes. He was lying on top of her, his arms still wrapped tightly around her body. Her silver eyes stared up at him, wide with shock. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice unsteady. He couldn't breathe, not because of the smoke, not because of the pain, but because of the look in her eyes, the raw, unguarded fear of losing him. For a moment, the battle around them faded. The shouting, the fire, the chaos, all of it blurred. There was only her. His heart screamed the truth he had been running from. He couldn't lose her. Not her, not now. Not ever, Elira, he whispered, his forehead pressing against hers. His voice trembled, filled with everything he had never said. I can't let you go." Her hand rose weakly, gripping his arm. Her touch was warm, desperate, alive. Her lips parted and she breathed the words that burned into him. "Live. We must live." "Then, you may ask me again." The sound of her voice broke him. He wanted to kiss her right there in the ashes, in the fire, in the storm. But he didn't. He couldn't. Not yet. Instead, he held her tighter for 1 second longer. Just long enough to feel the truth settle inside him. And then he rose, pulling her with him, his weapon ready once more. The battle wasn't over. The night wasn't done. But Daniel knew something with unshakable certainty now. This wasn't just war. This wasn't just survival. This was the moment of truth. Because the next time he asked her, he would already know his answer. And nothing, not war, not enemies, not even death would take it away. The battle raged for hours. Plasma fire lit the night sky. Screams echoed through the broken halls and smoke painted everything in gray. Daniel fought with a fire he did not know he had. He moved as if the pain in his back did not exist, as if the wounds on his arms were nothing, because Elira was still standing beside him. Every time she raised her weapon, he covered her flank. Every time she moved forward, he followed. Their rhythm was not planned, not trained, it was instinct. Two lives moving as one. When the last of the enemy fell, silence came like a heavy wave. The soldiers stood among the ruins of the outpost, their faces pale with exhaustion. Bodies of the fallen, both human and alien, lay across the floor. The air was thick with smoke and sorrow. Daniel lowered his rifle slowly. His hands shook. His chest heaved. He looked at Aelira, searching for any sign of injury. She was covered in ash and blood, her armor scorched and cracked. But she was alive. Alive. That single word filled his entire being. She caught his stare, and for the first time since the chaos began, she allowed her shoulders to drop. Her weapon lowered and her body swayed. Daniel rushed to her side, catching her before she could fall. "You're hurt," he whispered, his voice raw. Her lips curved into a faint smile even as her strength faded. "And you are burned." He shook his head. "That doesn't matter." Her silver eyes studied him, soft and unguarded. The walls she always carried were gone. There was no mask, no armor, no war between them in that moment. Only two souls clinging to the fragile thread of survival. Daniel guided her into a corner where the smoke was thinner. They sank to the floor, side by side, their shoulders brushing. For a long time they did not speak. The silence was heavy but not empty. It was full of everything they could not yet say. Finally, Aelira broke it. Her voice was quiet, almost fragile. "You risked your life for me." Daniel turned his head toward her. "Of course I did." Her eyes searched his face. "Why?" The question cut into him like a blade. He wanted to answer. He wanted to scream the truth that burned inside him. But the words tangled in his throat. Why? Because he could not imagine a world without her. Because she had become the air he breathed. Because when she looked at him, he felt alive in a way he had not felt in years. But all he managed was, "Because I couldn't lose you." Her breath caught. For a moment she seemed to stop existing, as if the world had paused around her. Then slowly her hand rose. It trembled, weak from the fight but steady in its purpose. She touched his face, her fingers brushing the edge of his jaw. Daniel froze. The warmth of her hand spread through him like fire. His heart pounded, every beat echoing in his ears. And then the words slipped from his lips before he could stop them. "If I kissed you, what would you do?" The question hung in the smoke-filled air. He had not planned it. It had burst out of him, raw and unguarded. Aelira's eyes widened. For a heartbeat, she said nothing. Daniel feared he had broken everything, that he had spoken too soon, too foolishly. But then she whispered, "I would not stop you." His breath caught. He leaned closer without meaning to, his forehead nearly touching hers. The world around them vanished. The smoke, the ruins, the broken walls. There was only her breath on his lips, her heartbeat against his chest. He wanted to kiss her. Gods, he wanted it more than anything. But just before their lips could meet, she closed her eyes and pressed her forehead to his. Not a kiss. Something different. Something deeper. The touch was soft, trembling, filled with everything they could not say aloud. His body melted against hers, his hand rising to hold the back of her head. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing each other in. It was not a kiss, but it was more. It was a promise. When they finally pulled apart, her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Not yet," she whispered. "The war is not done. The world is not ready, but one day." Daniel swallowed hard, his chest aching. He wanted to argue. He wanted to demand that tomorrow be that day, but he saw the truth in her eyes. Not yet. So he nodded, his forehead brushing hers once more. "One day," he whispered back. Outside, the night grew quiet. The stars still watched, eternal and distant, as if they knew what had just been born in the ashes below. Daniel and Aelira sat together in the ruins, their bodies weary, their hearts burning with a fire that no enemy could ever extinguish. The kiss had not happened, but in its place, something greater had begun. And in the silence of that night, Daniel swore to himself that when the war ended, when peace was real, when the world allowed it, he would not ask her again. He would simply do it. The outpost was quiet after the storm of battle. Too quiet. Broken walls whispered of what had happened, and the smell of smoke still clung to the air. Many soldiers had fallen, and the survivors carried the weight of their absence in their eyes. Daniel walked through the ruined corridors with slow steps. His burns ached beneath the bandages wrapped around his back, but the pain didn't matter. His mind was somewhere else. No, not somewhere, someone. Aelira. He found her in the med bay, sitting on the edge of a cot while a medic carefully sealed a deep cut across her shoulder. The silver of her skin shimmered faintly under the light, but her eyes were far away, gazing at nothing. When she noticed him, her lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, not quite sorrow. Something in between. You should be resting, she said softly. Daniel stepped closer, ignoring the sting in his muscles. So should you. The medic gave him a tired glance but said nothing, finishing the work before leaving them alone. Silence settled, heavy but not uncomfortable. Daniel pulled a chair and sat across from her. For a long while neither spoke. They didn't need to. The battle had carved words into both of them that could not be spoken aloud. Finally, Elira broke the silence. I thought you would die, she whispered. Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to make a joke, to lighten the weight of her words, but nothing came. He only said the truth. I thought the same about you. Her eyes lifted, silver and fragile, and for the first time he saw the fear she had hidden during the fight. It wasn't the fear of death, it was the fear of losing him. That realization shook him more than any wound. Rest, Daniel, she whispered. We both must heal. And so they did. Days turned into weeks. The outpost rebuilt slowly, piece by piece, but scars remained. Both human and alien soldiers worked side by side, the memory of the attack forcing them into something closer than duty. Something like family. Daniel and Elira healed together in those days. He would sit with her during the long, quiet nights, watching the stars beyond the cracked windows. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they sat in silence, but always their presence was enough. One evening, as the orange sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel found her outside the base, sitting on a broken piece of wall. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of burned earth. He joined her without a word. For a long time, they just watched the sky. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice low. Do you ever wonder why the stars keep shining even after everything? Elira tilted her head, her silver hair catching the fading light. Because they do not belong to our wars. They burn for themselves, not for us. Daniel nodded slowly. Maybe that's why I like them. They don't care who wins or loses, they just exist. A faint smile touched her lips. Like you. He glanced at her, confused. What do you mean? Her eyes softened. You fight, you bleed, you carry your pain. Yet when I look at you, I see someone who refuses to let war decide who he is. You burn, Daniel. Not for the past, not for hatred, for something more. Her words pierced him. He felt exposed, seen in a way no one had ever seen him before. He swallowed hard, his voice rough. And you give me something to burn for. The air between them thickened, heavy with meaning. His hand moved slightly, resting on the stone near hers. Close enough to touch, close enough to shatter the fragile balance they held. Her eyes flicked down to his hand, then back to his face. For a moment, Daniel thought she would close the gap, that she would let herself give in, but instead she whispered, Not yet. The same words as before, gentle, firm, unshakable. Daniel clenched his jaw and nodded, though it tore at him. He understood. She was not rejecting him. She was protecting something fragile, something too precious to rush. So he stayed beside her, letting the silence speak what their lips could not. That night, when they returned inside, Daniel caught her gaze one last time. And in her eyes he saw the promise again. The same promise from the night of fire and smoke, not yet, but one day. And for the first time, Daniel found he could wait. Because for the first time since the war began, hope felt real. The war ended quietly, not with fireworks, not with celebrations. It ended with silence. The last of the enemy surrendered. Their weapons dropped in the dust, their voices empty with defeat. The news spread slowly through the galaxy. Some wept, some cheered, but most were simply tired. Tired of loss, tired of pain, tired of waiting for peace that always seemed so far away. At the outpost, Daniel stood among the ruins that had become his home. The scars of battle still marked the walls, but the air felt different, lighter. He could breathe without waiting for sirens. He could look at the sky without fearing fire would fall from it. And yet his heart was restless, because peace was here. And peace meant the promise could no longer hide behind not yet. He found Elira near the edge of the camp. She stood alone, staring at the horizon where the sun was climbing slowly into the sky. The golden light painted her silver skin with warmth, as if the universe itself wanted to honor her. Daniel stopped a few steps behind her, his throat tightening. For weeks he had waited. For weeks he had swallowed the fire inside him. But now he could not hold it anymore. Elira. he called softly. She turned, her eyes finding him instantly. The corners of her lips lifted in a quiet smile. Daniel. He walked closer, his steps heavy with everything unsaid. For a moment neither spoke. The wind brushed past them, carrying the scent of grass and earth, scents he had almost forgotten during the war. Finally, Daniel exhaled. It's over, her gaze softened. Yes, it is over. But her voice carried something more, relief and sadness. Because endings, even peaceful ones, always carried sorrow for what was lost. Daniel's hands clenched at his sides. His heart pounded as he took one step closer. Then another, weeks of silence, weeks of waiting, weeks of swallowing the truth. It all broke inside him in a single breath. If I kissed you, what would you do? The same question, the same words. But this time the world was different. The war was done. The silence was not filled with fear. The moment was theirs alone. Elira's eyes widened, the silver in them catching the rising light. For a long heartbeat she said nothing. Daniel feared the silence, feared it more than bullets, more than death, but then she laughed softly. Not mocking, not cruel. A laugh that sounded like rain after years of drought. What would I do? She repeated, her voice trembling, gentle. She took a step toward him. And then another, until she stood so close he could feel her breath. Warm and steady against his lips, her hand rose, brushing his cheek with a tenderness that made his knees weak. I would remind you, she whispered, her forehead pressing against his, that I waited for this moment longer than you can imagine. Daniel's heart stopped. Her lips curved into a small, fragile smile. And then, I would kiss you back. Before he could speak, before he could even breathe, she closed the space between them. Her lips touched his, soft at first, then deeper, warmer, filled with every unspoken word they had carried through fire and smoke, through fear and silence, through war and waiting. Daniel's world shattered and rebuilt itself in her arms. He kissed her like a drowning man tasting air for the first time. She kissed him like someone who had found the piece of herself she thought was lost forever. There were no sirens, no explosions, no war to steal the moment away. Only them. When they finally pulled apart, their foreheads still pressed together, Daniel's chest ached with more than breathlessness.
His voice trembled when he whispered, "You left me speechless." Elira smiled, her silver eyes glistening with tears she did not try to hide.
Good. Then I've done my part. Daniel laughed, the sound breaking from him like sunlight through clouds. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her as if the world might try to take her away again. But it would not. Not this time. Because the war was over. Because peace was here. Because love, against every rule of nature, against every scar of the past, had survived. And as the sun rose higher, casting its light over the broken outpost, Daniel knew something with unshakable certainty. Humanity had always fought to prove itself worthy of survival. But standing there, holding Elira, he realized the truth. It wasn't just about survival. It was about connection, about love, about finding something worth living for in the middle of ruins. That was what made them human. That was what made them more. And with her hand in his, Daniel knew he would never be alone again.